I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker. His name is Dr. Elliot Eisenberg. He is internationally acclaimed economist and public speaker, specializing in making economics fun, relevant, and educational. Dr. Eisenberg earned a BA in economics with first-class honors from McGill University in Montreal, as well as a master and PhD in public administration from Syracuse University. Got to talk slower because I think he's just finishing up his breakfast. Eisenberg is the chief economist of Graphs and Laughs, LLC, a Miami-based economic consultancy that serves a variety of clients across the United States. He writes a syndicated column and authors a daily 70-word commentary on the economy that is available at www.econ7070.com. Elliot's interests include walking at least 5 miles a day. My hat is off to you, sir. Reading as many newspapers as he can get his hands on. He loves ice hockey. Being from Montreal, I can completely understand that. We were just sharing stories. Sounds like an awesome childhood of getting to know all the professional players in Montreal. And of course, he loves talking economics with crowds large and small. So with that, will you please help me welcome Dr. Elliot Eisenberg.
Good morning, good morning. It's a I think I have both on, yeah. It's a pleasure to be here. I've got a lot to talk about. We're gonna start quick. But first, this is a golf course? No, not a golf course, so no golf jokes then. Okay, we'll do out the golf course. Where do we begin? So the first question, is it too loud? Feedback? So the first question everybody asks is, are we in a recession? And the answer is no, we're not in a recession yet. We're gonna get there, I promise you. So just enjoy the way it is now. Why rush to the recession? What's the point, right? It's like, no, you wanna stay awake, you wanna enjoy yourself. But the economy's weakening, there's no question about it. It's clearly weakening. You're seeing all kinds of data, and I'm gonna go through it and discuss it in some detail, but we can begin at the 30,000-foot level and look high up and see what's going on. Okay, GDP's on the screen there, composed of 4 terms. You had some terrible high school class. They probably introduced you to that thing and you thought you'd never see it again. C is household consumption. It's the first part of GDP. It's about 70% of GDP. It's held up remarkably well. It's held up so well, it's almost bad. It's bad because we don't get weak. Our economy's not really falling very much. The Fed's raised rates a lot. We're going to talk a lot about that. And the economy really isn't falling into recession yet because spending is so good because we've saved up so much money from COVID. We paid down our credit card bills. There was forced savings. And as a result, the first term is weakening, but very slightly. It's going to weaken more. But to date, it hasn't weakened much. Very weird. The second term is I, corporate investments in plant and equipment, and inventory. Okay, inventories are done. Except for automobiles, there's no more inventory needs anymore. If you like buying things at stores like Tuesday Morning or Five Below or whatever, go have a fun time. You can go hog wild now. Those stores are bursting with inventory, right? They bought stuff for nothing from Macy's and Nordstrom's and so on, because we've rebuilt inventory, so that's done. And plant and equipment has held up pretty well because you can't find workers, and worker pay is going up really fast. But once unemployment starts to rise, and now firms are getting nervous about the recession, and now rates are higher, firms are going to start pulling back on plant and equipment and expenditure and CapEx as well. So I is going to weaken, but surprisingly, it's not weak much yet. So C and I are holding up. That's 85% of GDP. They'll weaken, but they're not there yet quite. That's why the recession hasn't really started yet. G is government spending, the third term in GDP. It's crashed, completely crashed, and that's a good thing. It's just bad timing. It's good because government doesn't have to spend so much because COVID's over, right? We're here, we're not wearing masks, We've lived with COVID, unlike the Chinese that now are stuck in a prison of zero COVID tolerance policy because they have bad injections and no one has any immunity. We've all had 4. My mother's had 5 shots. I've had it COVID twice. My sister's had it 3 times. Her baby, who's 4, has had it twice. You know, we're immune now. It doesn't really matter. There's nothing that can happen now that's going to knock me off my game with COVID, pretty much. So government spending has collapsed because all the stimulus that came from government spending to help ameliorate the problem of COVID is over. In fiscal 20 and fiscal 21, the budget deficit was about $3 trillion. And right now, the budget deficit for fiscal 22, which ended September 30th, was $1 trillion. I mean, that's a $2 trillion decline. I mean, that's great news. The problem is now friggin' monetary policy is getting tight. So you've got tight fiscal policy accidentally. At the same time, you've got tightening monetary policy. That's a really bad idea. It just worked out that way. And then there's a shooting war in Europe because the dumb Russians are just too stupid to know when to stop. Putin has a shovel in his hands and he's going to dig himself deeper, hopefully. X minus M is exports minus imports. And what's going on there? Exports, our net budget trade deficit was terrible for all of 20 and 21 because we were importing tons of personal protective equipment from China and all that sort of stuff. But earlier this year, starting in March, April, May, June, July, August, our trade deficit got really good. We stopped importing things because we had imported tons of stuff earlier. And exports got better. Tourists came to America, that's considered an export. We were exporting stuff, and that was really good. The trade deficit went down, that was nice. But now it's going into reverse because the dollar is really, really strong. So if you're thinking of buying a house like in Canada or Mexico or Europe or Japan, do it now. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity because the dollar is really, really strong because our rates and growth are much better than the west of Western Europe and the developed world. So C and I are going to weaken, G is already crashed, and X minus M is falling. This is the key part, and they're going to weaken. I'm going to show you all the data. It's going to happen. That's what happens when rates rise. That's why they raise rates. It just takes a little longer. So let's look. This is first automobiles. I figure you can't come to the Ohio and not talk about cars. Cars usually are very informative. They tell you a lot about the economy because they're like 1/10 of a house. They cost about 1/10 as much as a house does. And we literally sell 10 times as many cars per year than houses. We build 1.6 million houses, and we sell about 16, 17 million cars. So it's perfect. Except now, cars don't tell us jack, nothing, because there aren't enough semiconductors. So you don't know why the car sales are so low. On the very far right, you can see them. They're over there. This is a matter of a lack of supply, not necessarily a lack of demand. Now, lack of demand will probably show up soon, but it hasn't yet. So normally you watch cars because they bounce around a lot, and now they're not bouncing because there are no semiconductors. So cars are not informative. The second thing I used to look at a lot is real retail sales. This is stuff you bring home in a bag, or more likely Amazon delivers to your house. Maybe you have some experience with that. The problem is I don't know how to interpret this data anymore. I'm lost. I am totally lost. So look, here's the story. This is the last recession, the housing bust right there. It took 12 months to go from peak in January of 08 till the end of 08. It took 12 months for sales to decline by that much. One movement in the index down the side there. We have a trend up, great. Then COVID comes, we're all going to die, so why buy anything? Right. We're all wearing a mask, we're praying to God, we don't know how we get COVID. I remember going to like Costco and buying tuna fish and washing each can of tuna fish because I was fearful I'd get tuna fish, touch the COVID on the can, scratch my eye and die. But okay, that was stupid. Whatever. So it falls, and then 12 minutes later it comes back. Not 12 months, 12 minutes later it returns. And then it goes up again. From the trough to the peak is a 50% rise in the consumption of stuff. 50% in the midst of COVID. That's why our supply chains completely crashed. This is no surprise. So now the question is what happens next? So now we're stuck in our homes. This is like early 21. We're stuck in our homes. We have nothing to do. We can't go anywhere. You want to go to a basketball game? Well, then the person sitting next to you will kill you. You want to go to a hairdresser or a barber shop? Well, they'll kill you. Dentist, death. Anything you can think of that you want to do is tinged with the possibility of death. And you have to have a very, very high discount rate to really want to risk death for a hamburger. I mean, that's just stupid. So I get it. We buy a lot of junk. And we can't go to the game. You're all probably Ohio State fans or something. And they're playing arch rival Michigan, and you hate them. So you want to invite all your friends to the game, but you can't because you're all going to kill each other. So you buy pavers, you buy a pergola, you buy a fancy grill, a Weber grill. You have a party outside. We're all doing that at the same time. Okay, that makes sense. But why the hell is it so damn high now? Now we can go to a bar, we can go to ballet, we can see a basketball game, we can go to a baseball game. What the hell keeping it up? I don't understand. It's high. So economists look at this and they go, wow, you know, like this past month, they said, oh, retail sales were up. I mean, that's not bad, don't get me wrong. But I don't want to spend any more. I mean, I bought a Peloton for myself. I bought a Peloton for my daughter, my sister, my mother, my ex-wife, my girlfriend, my mistress. I mean, I bought 7 Pelotons. I'm finished. I mean, how much more crap do you need to buy? So I don't know if this is good news or bad news. I truly have no idea. What I do know is this slide's important. This is total sales. That's everything we buy. This slide here is just goods. This slide here includes services. Okay, that's really important. This is 70% of GDP. It's starting to weaken just a little bit. It's behind schedule, and I'm going to show you where it's weakening and why. But this is starting to get soft, and this is going to get softer. Interest rates are higher. So you have a credit card balance, your monthly credit card minimum payment's going to go up, right? All these things that people are going to start losing their jobs, they're going to spend less. They'll spend less money, obviously. Here, you can see it. Now, why is it held up so well? I mean, we were on trend here, and then we have COVID, yeah, and then we're right back on trend pretty much. How the hell did we hold up so well? The key measure is this, household net worth. From the peak, from the trough, just before COVID starts, we're right there. That's 116 trillion bucks. We fall to 110 trillion bucks in that first month of COVID. Remember end of February 20 to the end of March 20? I remember that time well. I'm a public speaker. All my engagements, every one was canceled. My house price is going to hell, right? And my portfolio's going to hell. I think, well, I got a limp to Social Security. How am I going to manage? I got to eat a lot of macaroni and cheese and tuna fish or something. I'm kidding, but we were nervous. Anyways, then Fed lowers rates to 0, right? And the government starts handing out checks like candy. The combination leads to all kinds of crazy outcomes. On the money side, the government's giving us money. They're giving us unemployment insurance. They're giving us stimmy checks. In 2021, they're giving us child tax credits of $300 to $350 per kid, depending on the age of the kid, and so on. Life is really pleasant at that point. But more importantly than that is interest rates go to 0. And when rates go to 0, the everything rally begins. Everything. Stock market, bond market, house prices, multifamily units, commercial construction does, commercial stuff does well. The only sectors that do bad are retail and hotels. That's it, nothing else. If you owned a hotel and you owned a retail store, thanks very much for, goodbye. It's been nice to know you, take 2 years off, go away. But short of that, so our net worth goes from 110 trillion at the bottom to 150 trillion on top. $40 trillion rise in 7 quarters. No, we can afford everything. Interest rates are 0, money's free. There's tons of cash floating around. Our wealth has never been higher. We can afford to buy everything. It's phenomenal. It doesn't last. And you can see it here in Q1, that's the top. It ended. We lost 150 billion, not much. And in Q2, we lost more. We lost $6.2 trillion because the stock market went down and house prices stopped going up so much and didn't compensate quite completely for it. And Q3 will be worse and Q4 will be worse because housing prices now are falling and the stock market's going nowhere and declining too. So personal wealth is not doing so, and that's going to hurt sales because if you don't feel rich, you're not going to buy stuff. Just as Fed engineered this by lowering rates, the Fed's engineering this by raising rates. The Fed says, we want you, Chris, to feel poor. We don't want you to buy crap. We want you to buy crap before, but not anymore, we're done. So if you're poor and you're a low-income family, earning maybe $50,000 a year or something, right? Well, you can't afford crap now because rent's higher, gas is higher, and so on. And if you're rich, like you, we don't want you to buy crap, or him, Oh, the guy with the bow tie. I like the bow tie guy. You're rich. Now you don't feel rich because you just lost $6 trillion in Q2, let alone Q3, which you'll lose another $5 or $6 trillion, right? So in a case like mine, I wanted to impress my girlfriend. I looked in, I thought, okay, I'll buy her a Birkin bag. For those of you unfamiliar, a Birkin bag costs like $30,000, right? I thought, yeah, it's a good relationship, I'll invest. And then I went, I'm not feeling so rich. I buy her a pair of Christian Louboutin shoes instead. They're $2,000. Now, she doesn't know I was going to buy her the Birkin bag. She's still happy. But I know I'm saving like 90% of my money because I'm feeling poor. This is a feature, not a bug. The housing market's going to hell in a handbasket by design, and consumption's going down by design because that's what happens when you raise interest rates. And you can see more stuff here, except my clicker stopped working. Oh, there it's working. This is savings rates. Look at savings rates. They were 3%, 3%, because we're running out of cash. Because rent's higher, gas is higher, food's higher, everything's higher. Seeing my psychologist is more expensive too. I'm worried about my wealth. I go see my psychologist. And I get poorer, I feel more, it's more worse. I have to see her more often, it's more expensive. Anyways, I digress. But if you look here, you can see the things that, yeah. So here, the last time savings rates were this low was right there. In the mid-2000s through 2008. It was a 3-year period where savings was low. Now, the reason savings were low back then was because the housing boom was in full swing, the last housing boom that led to the housing bust, right? And there was a credit bubble. Remember, you have a dog? Who has a dog here? You have a dog? You have a dog? You have a dog. Your dog probably got credit card offers back in 2006 or 7. My daughter was 9. She got credit card offers. She had a $100,000 line of credit on 4 or 5 banks. Okay, I'm kidding, but you get my point. So now why is it going down? Well, it's going down because we built up savings during COVID, a couple $1 trillion. And now we've been running down the savings by about $100 billion a month. So in about a year, all the excess savings that we generated during COVID, because we had nowhere friggin' to go, you had a plan. You were going to take your family and your kids and your grandkids and maybe their kids and your great-grandkids. You look pretty good for an old guy. And you were going to go on a trip to India or Brazil or some fun, fancy place, Kruger National Park, and take pictures of wildebeest or something. And then COVID comes and you have nothing to friggin' do, right? So you saved all this money, forced savings and the stimulus and the child tax credits, and don't pay your rent and don't pay your mortgage and don't pay your student loan. I don't know about you, but life is pretty good if you had no bills. And suddenly life is really fun, So we built up savings, but now we're eating in that savings. This is going to hurt us. It's keeping us alive, and Christmas season this year will be pretty good because we're burning down our savings. But then what happens next year when we're friggin' out of savings? So this is a bit of a concern. And then there's credit card use. It's gone way up. Blue is credit card. Forget the red. The red student loans and automobiles. It's a different story. You look at the bottom, student credit card loans peak out here, and it takes about 10 years for them to get back to where they were, roughly 10 years. And here it takes about 10 months, 12 months, whatever. So credit card use is up, savings rates are down. This is not a fundamentally strong situation. You cannot sustain an economy on credit card use and reduce savings rates. Yeah, for a short time, sure, fine, things get better. But no, things aren't going to get better. They're going to get worse. So this is just keeping us up, forcing the Fed to raise rates more or longer to fight this, right? We're fighting the Fed here. Oh, employers aren't letting go of workers. Unemployment remains low because employers think, oh, holy cow, it's hard to find employees. It's really hard. It's expensive. Training them costs money. I'm going to hoard my employees. Well, as long as you hoard the employees, unemployment stays low. As long as unemployment stays low, wage growth is good. As long as wage growth is good, you have inflation. So everything that we're doing is delaying the inevitable process here and making the Fed angry, and they're going to raise rates more. And it's just the way it is, right? So you have credit card issues. Then there's disposable income. And you can see disposable income here is flat. It's the same as it was before COVID. It was actually higher. Here's before COVID. And now it's there. It's $700 higher then than now. Yeah, stimmy check 1, stimmy check 2, stimmy check 3. Yeah, it was pretty good. You see all the stimmy checks here too. Stimmy check 1, stimmy check 2, stimmy check 3. They filter through the economy, but our economy, we haven't had income growth now in forever. It's been a long time of almost meaningless income growth. So income is flat per capita basis. New job growth is slowing down. Savings rates are going down. Credit card use is going up. Wealth is declining. What am I missing here? Now, I guess if the government gave us all marijuana, we'd feel better, but you get the idea here. So there is good news here too. Don't just slash your wrists yet. Wait a few minutes. You'll need to later, but not yet. Oil prices are down. This is important. It's meaningful, right? And the important thing to look at here is long series of increases or decreases. So this is what caused gas prices to rise. You get a 2-year rise in the gas price from $20 to $120 a barrel. That matters. You see it. By contrast, if you see this or that, I mean, for years, oil didn't matter. For 5 or 6 years, oil had no meaning in our life. None. Yeah, it went up and down a little bit, but who cares? That's just noise. The Iranians send a bomb to the Saudis, oil prices bump a few bucks. There's a fire in some refinery in northern Canada. Yeah, like big deal, who cares, right? It's meaningless. But you get this, that's a big deal. You get this, that's a big deal. But we're not going to get that anymore. Now we're going to get noise. We're getting a lot of noise now. We're getting noise because of China. China can't decide what it wants to do. China's economy is kind of sucky. They're growing much more slowly than they thought because they're trapped in this zero COVID tolerance policy plan that they've got. 2.5 years ago when COVID started, their COVID solution was brilliant. It kept them alive. The problem is now it's killing their economy because they have crappy shots, their elderly aren't vaccinated, and they have no hospital beds per capita. The combination is really deadly. So as desperately as they want to get out of the bind that they're in, they can't, unless they admit that their vaccines are no good and use foreign vaccines. It one day wouldn't surprise me if they relabel the Pfizer vaccines with Sinovac and lie like they lie about everything else to everybody else. But I'm not bitter, so don't worry about that. They probably delivered COVID to us as a gift, but we can't prove it and we have no way of ever knowing. So it's impossible to make the claim, but I digress. The other piece of news that's good out there is transportation costs have come down. Supply chains are getting a lot better. They really are. There's very little evidence of worsening supply chains anywhere for anything. So if you have to transport anything or move anything, it's much, much cheaper than it was. So this is normal. 53 is about normal. You want to be in the middle between these one standard deviation left and right lines, right? So that's dead normal. And where are we now? We're dead normal. So trucking is now no longer a problem. Now, you may have a long-term contract with a trucking company, and you're paying an extra 50 cents a buck a mile. I get it. But the next contract won't be bad, and spot prices are back to normal. That's good news. Here's more good news. Oh, this isn't even the latest slide. I apologize. So this is the cost of shipping something from China, from Shanghai to LA. And you can see pre-COVID it was about $1,700. COVID hits, it hits over $12,000. And now it literally is back at $1,800. It fell since then. This slide's like 10 days old. It's gotten even cheaper since then. So the cost of transporting a 40-foot corrugated metal container across the Pacific Ocean is now exactly what it was before COVID began. So shipping costs are dropping like a rock, right? It's no longer profitable to own a trucking company. It was immensely profitable. These firms like Moller-Maersk or CMG, CMA, the French transportation shipping company, these guys were making in a quarter what they made in a year or two a year ago. Now they're losing their shirt because they bought new ships and the demand is sunk and the prices are collapsing. That's the way things work. But for you guys to move goods is easy now. It's cheap, no problem. Here, delivery times. This is from the New York Fed. There's no delay. None, zero. Here, manufacturing backlog. What backlog? There's no backlog. So you look at all this data, prices paid. Now they're still high. Okay, this is a problem. Inflation persists. It's going away. It's much less than it was, but it's not fallen like backlog orders and prices of shipping goods. No, because labor costs are still high. That's the big problem. We'll get into that quite a lot later. But generally speaking, transportation and shipping and moving stuff has gotten meaningfully cheaper. And these are all deflationary trends, right? This is going to reduce. The oil prices not going up anymore. They're going to bounce but go nowhere. And shipping costs coming down. These are either neutral for inflation or deflationary, like this is. This is pretty good news here. Here, prices paid. Now, this is national data, and they're telling us the prices paid have gone back to normal again. Remember what inflation is. This is important. Inflation isn't the price of something. Inflation's the change in the price in something. So if you used to pay $5 for whatever it was, and now it's 7, that 5 to 7 movement is inflation. If it stays at 7, it's just expensive, but there's no inflation. The Fed's not going to get the price from 7 back to 5, right? That's a whole separate conversation. And that's a destructive effort, and that would be very counterproductive for the Fed to try and do that. Deflationary pressures are very, very evil for the economy. If you want to get into Q&A, we can talk about why. But this is telling us that the prices to buy things aren't going up anymore. It's no longer costly to make stuff, right? Labor costs aren't a problem. I don't quite believe it, but you know, data's not all wrong. This is new orders. No new orders. New orders, they're working through their backlog. This is generally, you look at all the slides I just showed you since the slide, they're all pretty good data. It's all generally speaking good. We can argue with this or that or here or there or cars or the northeast or the southwest of the US. They can't get peppers or something. Okay, but generally speaking, this is pretty good news. And if you add it up, you can see here, this is an index of overall activity, transportation and prices and inventory, labor, all together. You can see zero's neutral. It's getting towards 0. It's still way high, but it's getting much better. So transportation, all that infrastructure and stuff is getting better. Good. This is deflation. So the cost of goods is going to start to come down because our demand for goods is flat, high but flat. Shipping costs are down. Firms are better able to manufacture stuff. So goods costs are down, transportation costs are down, and food costs aren't going up. Okay, turkey aside. There's avian flu. They had to kill like 50 million turkeys or 100 million turkeys or something, right? They had to kill chickens before, then egg price went up. Now it's turkeys that are being killed, mostly in Iowa and Minnesota, but I digress. But this is also better. So things are getting cheaper on the goods side and on the energy side. And you can see it here. This is inventory of, most importantly, retailers, so business to consumers. And this is where the rubber hits the road. It's either business to business or business to consumer, right? So we're looking at business to consumer here. So you walk into a store and you want to buy a shirt or a pair of pants or a jacket or something, and the damn stores don't have what you want, right? You encountered this a year ago, 2 years ago. You couldn't buy anything you wanted, and as a result, the prices went crazy. But now it's almost over. The historical average of retailer inventory to sales ratios is somewhere between 1.4 and 1.5. In recessions, it goes up because sales plummet, not because inventories rise. So here you're at the low end, 1.3, the low end, the high end, the middle end. Then COVID comes, and then it gets terrible, and then it returns to normal, and then we have the descent into inflationary hell. This is a problem. That's telling you you're short everything, right? And we were. Couldn't buy anything. Everything was more expensive. We were all bitched and complained, and things were expensive. But now look at it, way up. It's almost back to normal. And if you get rid of cars, this whole sequence comes down, and this one goes up. So you're almost back to normal if you ignore cars. I mean, cars are a big deal. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. But, you know, except for cars, we're back to normal, and cars are improving. Car sales are getting better. But sentiment sucks. It's hard to imagine this. I mean, this is right, we are right now there, but we were a few months ago here. That was the friggin' lowest level in 50 years. And that's crazy. I mean, think about it. Here, COVID comes, visits us. I mean, we're going to die. And we were much more miserable back in 2008 when our house price was down. Here we're going to die. And now we're much more miserable because inflation's up. Are you kidding me? I mean, inflation's bothersome, don't get me wrong. I don't like seeing my house price decline. It's not anymore, but now it is again, I guess. But death seems to be more serious in my mind. But yet, I guess not. So what the hell's going on? I don't really know. I'm not a sociologist, but we know this. We know this. We know we're driving recklessly on the roads and killing each other at higher rates than we ever have before. We know that fentanyl overdose, Americans' suicides were about 110,000 last year, right? This is drug-induced suicides. Now, some of them are accidental because they're cutting the drugs with bad stuff. Yeah, I read about that too. But still, that's crazy low. So it must be inflation. The fear of unemployment? I don't even think it's unemployment. I think it's inflation. You know, like, what's your name? Mike. Who cares about Mike? He's just some dude, you know? So, good. Keep going. Let's go. So Mike loses his job, you know, like, yeah, whatever. I don't know Mike. Then I see Mike bitching on Facebook he has no money. So I crowdsourced, let's buy him a couple large pizzas, you know, and I'm done. But the problem is we all face inflation, right? So how many of you have had this conversation with somebody else, or certainly with yourself? You go and buy a cup of coffee, or you buy the cup. You go, oh my God, I just spent $10 on this. Or this cup of coffee cost $7.50 or whatever it was. Or this airplane to Pittsburgh was $500, $600. Or a ticket to a rock concert was $1,000 or something. They're forcing us to pay huge amounts of money because of the supply chain problems that were there before, and so on and so forth. So I think inflation's bothering us. Okay, if it was just households, maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal. But this is manufacturers. 50 is neutral. Next month, manufacturing goes into recession. Now, the good news here, and you aren't quite as heavy in manufacturing as they are north in the state, right? The further north you go, the more manufacturing you've got. Here you had a manufacturing recession here, and just before COVID, you did too. And we got out of the recession just to go into COVID. So you can have a manufacturing recession without a U.S. recession. You can have a housing recession without a U.S. recession. But this time we won't be so lucky. But here you can see we were really happy there, and now we're less and less happy because rates are going up. Workers are hard to find. Inflation's bad, and so on. And these aren't all going to go away tomorrow. But what happens when interest rates go up is you stop buying big-ticket items. What are big-ticket items? Oh, a house, a car. Let's buy 26 windows for my house. That's manufacturing, right? You can put aside manufacturing purchases because you don't need them. Oh, I'd like to buy a $3,000 refrigerator that goes shopping for me, it makes the order on Instacart and then the food is delivered. I'm waiting for that fridge to exist. It doesn't exist yet, but I'm waiting. I don't have to ever shop again the rest of my life because the fridge just sends off, a notice to my store that says, oh, a dozen eggs, please, and they come the next day. It'll get there. This recession was different. This recession, we bought things and didn't buy services because we were going to die. But normally, here, think about it. Let's go through it. What's your name? Kimberly. So Kimberly, you're fearful you're going to lose your job in 3 or 4 months. The recession will come. They'll lay you off, God forbid. You have a choice. You can either buy a $200,000 car, like a Ferrari or something, or take me to dinner for $200. What's it going to be? You're taking me to dinner. I'm a good-looking fellow. I'm really smart. And it's not going to bankrupt you if you lose your job. Now, in the recession, it was the opposite. Oh, I can't do these things. I want to travel. I'll buy a fancy a bus to travel with my family or something. Sounds like a horrible idea, personally, but to live with a bunch of people in a little, like a 200-square-foot thing, it sounds like a nightmare, but I digress. So that's why manufacturing is going into recession. It's housing and then manufacturing. That's the process. Housing, construction, manufacturing. But look at services. They're now way less happy than they were, but they're still pretty damn happy. They're like average happy. That's okay. You go to a hotel now, they charge you like triple the price for the hotel room, right? And then they say, oh, we're not going to clean your room every day. It's like, what? What? No, we're not going to clean your room. I said, why? Well, you're on vacation, sir. We don't want to disturb you. What? Your lack of disturbing me is now disturbing me. Thank you very much. You have to tell us 2 days in advance you want your room cleaned. Fine, I want my room cleaned tomorrow, the day after, and the day after. You got it? Yeah, but they're going to be less happy too because we're going to pull back on services, but not yet. Now, look at small business. That's a lot of you guys, right? Look at small business. They were happy, and now we're unhappy. Happy, unhappy. To give you some comparison, this is Trump winning the election. Unhappy, Happy, because you're going to get a tax cut. This is COVID coming. Happy, unhappy. This is happy. This decline from there to there is about as big as that decline or that rise. This is a meaningful decline. Small business is not happy in the slightest right now. So households, manufacturers, small business. Oh, here are CEOs. Any CEOs in the room here? Yeah, probably a lot of you. You're embarrassed to raise your hands now. Well, there's one, exactly one. One. I find that hard to believe. You're all just line workers. Okay, it's nice that the line workers here in Southern Ohio are so interested in what's going on. But look at this. That's COVID. That's the housing bust. It's the dot-com bust. That's the S&L crisis. And that's Paul Volcker raising rates to 18,500%. I looked it up, 18,500. Remember rates were 18,000% or something? Maybe I'm off by a few zeros. 5 for 5. Now they're going to be 6 for 6. But wait, we're not done. This is Europe. COVID, the housing, that's the global financial crisis in Europe. And this is the euro about to collapse. And Mario Draghi at the time was the head of the European Central Bank, and he said, literally, he said, I will do whatever it takes to save the euro. And at that time it was 13 or whatever it was, 14. And he ended up buying tons of bonds from the pigs. Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain. 5 good-for-nothing countries. And he saved the euro as a result. Right, okay, fine. Most of those countries are still back in the soup again, but that's a whole separate conversation. But they're 3 for 3. They'll be 4 for 4. And now look at CapEx. CapEx was stupendous. It was very good, and now it declines, and inflation's going up. So now CapEx is up by 8%, but what's inflation? 8%. So I don't know what the inflation on CapEx is. I bet it's higher than 8%. But assuming it's 8%, there's no growth in CapEx. That's not going to help our economy. This is leading CapEx expectations put up by the Philadelphia Fed, 3%, way worse. And then there's Kansas City Fed CapEx, 0. No CapEx. So households aren't feeling so good, so consumption's about to weaken. Corporate investment in plant equipment and inventory is clearly going to weaken. Interest rates are higher. A recession's on the way. Things that were profitable making 6 or 8 months ago are no longer nearly as viable as they were. Right? Oh, here's small business CapEx for the National Federation of Independent Business. You know, I'm not making this up, but this doesn't look promising, right? And then we have this accidentally tight fiscal policy. This is nuts. This is what should be good news, and it turns out to be bad news just because of the dint of timing. It's just bad luck. So here's the dot-com bust. W's president, he passes out stimmy checks. And then the stimmy checks end, there's a bit of a fiscal hangover, whatever. Then there's the housing bust. Obama's president. He sends out all kinds of money, and his crowning achievement was the ARRA, the American Something Recovery Act. That was the shovel-ready projects, right? They just weren't shovel-ready, but that's not his fault. Economically, it didn't make any difference. The money was distributed, that's what mattered, and it got spent. And then there's the fiscal hangover that comes after. Congress changed hands in the midterm election, just like it happened, like now again. Look here. Fiscal stimulus is very powerful, and then in 2 years, it goes from very strong to very weak. I thought at the time that that was a lot of contractionary fiscal policy, and that alone might drive us into recession if we had some other bad luck. Luckily, we didn't have any other bad luck, and we did not go into a recession. Growth wasn't particularly good, but it was okay. Now, if you'll remember, somewhere around late 13, so somewhere around here, when Ben Bernanke was chairman of the Fed, he said in an offhand comment that, you know, maybe it's time for us to begin to unwind our balance sheet and shrink the size of our balance sheet. And markets got nervous. Interest rates went up quickly because of the fear of mild tightening of monetary policy, very mild. And this period became known as the taper tantrum. Rates went up 100 bips, like almost 1 full percentage point in a couple of months. And then Bernanke, stroking his now Nobel Prize-wearing beard, goes, oops, that was a mistake. He doesn't do it for years. It takes years until they begin to lower their balance sheet. And now they're doing it again. But now it's much worse because the stimulus was much bigger at the peak. Now the contraction is much bigger. This is a friggin' 7 percentage point change from 4 plus to 3 minus on fiscal stimulus. And now we have tightening monetary policy. The Fed's raising rates like it hasn't raised in 42 years, and they're tightening their balance sheet. When the Fed last time began tightening their balance sheet in late 16 or early 17, I think it was, they did it for 2 years and then something broke, and they stopped in mid-19. The repo market went bananas. There was some massive liquidity problems, and they stopped. They're going to break something again. There's a saying in Wall Street, right? The Fed tightens until something breaks. Was it Britain breaking with Liz Truss and her stupid chancellor of the exchequer? That may have been it. Credit Suisse almost went under about a month ago. Their stock went to almost zero. Was that something breaking, the sound of something breaking? I don't know. But when the Fed raises rates, something tends to go wrong. It hasn't yet. Maybe it won't. Maybe we'll just have a recession and that will be it and that would be great. But this is a huge change along with Fed tightening and quantitative tightening at the same time, on top of global monetary policy tightening. We've never had this before. In the past, China's here in the cycle, and Britain's there, UK, Europe is there, and the US and North America are here, and it's bouncing around, whatever. But now we're kind of all going together, with the exception of China and Japan, which are in their own Far Eastern Asian funk. Unrelated funk, but they're both in a funk. Then we have interest rate hikes. So this is the Fed funds rate. This is the rate that they're screwing with right now. And right now, the Fed funds rate's close to 4%, so it's somewhere right about there. Now, if you look at this graph, it goes back to 1955. There were 13 rate hiking cycles. Every time you get a recession, except for here, here, and there. 64, 84, 94. When I realized that, I called up Jay Powell, who doesn't know me from Adam, and didn't return my calls. But I was going to tell him, all you have to do to raise rates is to wait till 2024, and then you have no problem. So what's going on? Well, first, let me explain what this means. What's your name? Ashley comes to see me because she has some physical ailment. And, you have your tennis elbow doesn't work or something. I'm the world's greatest repairer of elbows. You come to see me. Let's make it more serious because it's not likely that this is the case. But let's say you have a hip issue or something major. I have to do major surgery on you. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, the best in the world. That's why you see me, of course. And I tell you, well, let me talk to you. But your limp, whatever you have, the problem that you have, it will go away 100% guarantee. 100% because I'm the world's best. But let's talk about things. I want to talk about recuperative care and anti-rejection drugs and so on. I say, look, I've done this surgery 1,300 times in history. Turns out, 1,000 times, the patient dies on the table. Now, you won't limp, but you're going to be dead. The other 300 times, you'll survive, and you won't limp. So my 100% money-back guarantee on the limping thing still survives, even if you don't. But this is bad odds. You just walk out of my room. You're done. You're not going to entertain the surgery. You're happy to walk out and be a limping mother for the rest of your life or whatever. But that's okay because you may hate your husband, but you love your kids and your nephews and whatever, right? That's the problem we enter. There's a 10 in 13 chance we hit recession. Now, that's the historical odds. But they're worse than that. Because the reason we didn't get a recession here and there was because the economy wasn't all that strong. Inflation wasn't that high. The unemployment rate wasn't very high. And the Fed had room to maneuver. But now the Fed doesn't have the luxury of room to maneuver because the economy is already very hot. Unemployment's at a 50-year low. Inflation's at a 40-year high. I mean, this is an economy that's really chugging and pushing the engine very hard. You start tapping the brakes, something's going to go wrong. You don't have the luxury of time or making mistakes here. You don't. I've upset you so much you're leaving. I'm so sorry. No one would see you. Yeah, I realize you snuck out. Let that be a lesson to everybody else. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is when the Fed does this, you think the Fed knows what it's doing, right? There's a belief that they know what they're doing. But why do you think that? Do you know what you're doing? How many of you are parents? Do you have a clue how to raise a kid? You just ask your friends, yeah, it feels good, I'll go with my gut, yeah. And you get it right and you get it wrong, and the kids manage, and that's all there is to it, right? Well, it's the same thing here. So every 6 weeks the Fed meets, they have a meeting, right? And every second meeting, so once every 3 months, the Fed gives us predictions of where this rate will be. This is a rate they control. They vote on it and they raise it up and down depending on the economic conditions. When the economic conditions are good, they raise it. When things are bad, they lower it. The counter-cyclical policy all makes sense. So some economist who had some free time on his hands went back and looked at how accurate the Fed's forecasts were a year ahead. So right now, when the Fed meets on December 3rd or something, or 4th, whatever it is, they're going to give us their expectations of the Fed funds rate 12 months ahead. So early December 2023. This guy looked at what the forecasts were a year ahead and what the rate ended up being. Turns out the Fed gets it right a solid 34% of the time. The Fed also gives us their forecasts for inflation, unemployment, and GDP. Those are somewhere between 17% and 24%. A house plant would do better than the Fed, okay? And that's why guys like Friedman said, just increase the money supply at 3% and stop thinking. Or a guy named John Taylor made the Taylor rule that said essentially the same thing, but a little more elegantly, depending on unemployment and inflation. There's a rule. Why think? Thinking doesn't help. It's no help, because no one knows the friggin' future. So Powell gets up, you know, every 6 weeks he has a press, they have a press release at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then he comes up to the podium and he has a presser. And what does he say? He just makes crap up. He doesn't know any more about inflation, the direction of inflation, the likelihood of how long it will last than you. He doesn't. He's smart, but he doesn't know the future. Now, the other thing that makes me very nervous about, I've told you about consumer sentiment, small business sentiment, CEO sentiment, CapEx, fiscal policy. They're all going the wrong way. Then you have this magical thing called the yield curve. The yield curve tells you the relationship between time and money. Time is money, money is time. This is time. 1 year, 2, 5, 10, 20 years, whatever. This is interest rates. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. It's a positive relationship. The longer you borrow for, the more you pay. The longer you lend for, the more you get, right? Think of a home mortgage, a 30-year mortgage more than a 20-year mortgage. A one-year borrowing for a building, you're buying a building or something, is less than a 5-year loan, right? Upward sloping. But occasionally the yield curve inverts, it goes down. It's like impossible. You go, how can that be? Longer term money's cheaper than short term money? That's stupid. But it is. I didn't look this morning, but I looked last Thursday or Friday. A 10-year treasury was something like 3.7, and a 2-year treasury was 4.3. So 60, 70 basis points, 6, 7/10 of a point difference between a 2-year and a 10-year treasury in the wrong direction. When the yield curve inverts, that's a really bad sign. It tells you have a monetary policy problem. It's like going to the hospital. What's your name? Carolyn. And they say, my God, Carolyn, you got a fever of 117. You must be that's amazing you're still alive. You must be very ill. The thermometer's not making you sick. The thermometer says you got a problem. An inverted yield curve is telling you you have a damn bad monetary policy problem. And this problem is severe enough to drive you into recession. So the short-term rates are going up because the Fed's jacking them up too high. And because you're going to have a recession, the long-term rates fall. And you go, okay, Elliot, that's great. Who cares? Thank you. Look at the graph. Every time the blue squiggle is above the red bar, you have an inverted yield curve. The further down the blue line is, like down here, that means you have a very steep yield curve. And everybody's happy because banks borrow here, they lend there, and they make lots of money, and they don't have to work very hard. Are there any bankers in the room? Yeah. Okay, so I lied. It's even easier. They work even less. Okay, I'm kidding. It used to be that way, but now it's no longer so good. It's harder now, I know. You used to hit the golf course at 3, now you hit the golf course at 4. I'm kidding. But the lower this is, The higher the yield curve, the happier everybody is. That's a strong economy, a good economy. As this approaches the red line from the bottom, the yield curve is flattening. That's bad. When it hits the red line, it's dead flat. Short-term money and long-term money the same. The higher it gets, the steeper it goes, but the wrong way. Right now, we're at the steepest we've been in 42 years. Now, the kicker. Look every time there's an inversion. So every time the blue is above the red, look to the right of the blue. Look to the blue, look to the right. Look to the blue, look to the right. Look to the blue, look to the right, look to the blue, look to the blue, look to the blue. What do you see? Every single time you get a yield curve inversion with the blue above the red, what follows in short order? This is the steepest inversion we've had in 42 years. It doesn't guarantee a recession, but it makes it damn likely. You have to play the games to have it work out. Magic happens. The war in Europe could end. China could suddenly magically change their policies. You know, things could happen. Look, I'm not a big baseball fan. We were talking about baseball earlier. But the Phils almost won the World Series. They were a god-awful team, virtually talentless. They didn't know how to wear a baseball glove. Their errors per game were atrociously high. They were a true embarrassment to baseball. They happened to get hot and they happened to get lucky. And the only reason they made the playoffs was because they expanded the playoff number of teams making the playoffs by 2 so they could pay the players more money. That was, the owners got more games and the players got more salary. Fine. They eke into the playoffs. They have a great 2-week run, and then it all ends. But they were 2 wins away from the World Series. Instead, the Houston Trash Stros won. For those of you who are baseball fans, you understand the connotation there. The mild allusion to cheating, essentially. So you have a bad team against a team that cheated in the past. Not the world's best World Series there for anyways, I digress. We may not have a recession, but it's that much. Now, some people will say, well, you know, it's hard to know which yield curves to compare. You're a banker, right? So which yield curves do you use? I use the 10-1 yield curve here, but Bernanke, but Powell says he uses the 3-month, 18-month the distance between the 2 points. Which one's the right one? Well, who the hell knows? So you can do this. Take every single pair of treasuries duration, like 1 month, 3 month, 1 month, 6 month, 1 month, 12 month, 1 month, 2 year, 1 month, 3 year, 1 month, 5 year, 1 month, 7, and then do it with 2 months and 3 months and do every single possible combination of pairs. You wind up with 75% of the yield curves inverted. Look at the graph. Every time the yield curve gets above about 40, every time you get a recession. You don't have to be a genius to figure this out. Now, when does the recession come? Traditionally, it comes 2 years after the first rate hiking cycle. So 24 months. This year will be much faster when the recession comes. Why? The recession comes faster because look at the rate hiking cycle. This is an old slide. The rates are right there where my cursor is. Not there. They're there. This is the fastest rate hiking cycle in 42 years. You know, when you raise things, something bad happens. The slower it happens, the more we can respond. But now we have a tight economy, very rapid rate hikes. Something's going to break, and the economy is going to go into recession. Now, faster. Why faster? Because the rate hikes. When will it come? I think mid-next year. We'll run out of money, right? Things will start to slow, and we have the CapEx and the spending and the savings and it all, the Vigoro hits the mix master. Why does it take so long generally? Because people are stupid. Well, this time is different. My firm can avoid it. The Fed's smarter. This is all ridiculous. And the other reason is, the most important reason, is as Milton Friedman said way back when, their monetary policy comes with long and variable lags. We don't know how long it takes. How fast will people have to refi their house or their building? How far along are they in their construction project? Can they stop the project? Do they have to have it go through? So it depends on just the situation, how fast the rate hikes are, how high the rate is when you begin the process, and so on and so forth. Let me give you an example to make it more easy to understand. We've picked on various people in the past, right? Let me give you an example. Suppose you, what's your name? Evan's a big drug addict. or not a drug addict, he likes marijuana. And he consumes marijuana only through smoking it. Sometimes he takes a joint or a J. Sometimes he puts tobacco inside it. It's a blunt. We talked earlier. Sometimes he tells me he likes a bong in the evening. And on weekends, he likes a pipe. He told me he has many other devices. I didn't need to explore them with him. I trusted his expertise. But one day, he decided to no longer consume marijuana through smoking it. He wanted to try a new way. He wanted to eat it. So he bought some brownies or cookies. He told me his preferred thing is gummy bears, right? Remember, we talked about that? I lied. I said I wouldn't share our secrets, but that's life. Easy come, easy go. Now, he didn't know this. He told me this. He didn't know that when you eat it, it takes longer to metabolize. He told me that when he smokes it, it takes 8 minutes. He timed it. He told me. That's what he said. But he didn't know how long it takes when you eat it. When you eat it, he said he discovered later it takes about 40, 45 minutes in his case. Again, he times it. He showed me the data. It was very on his phone. He had an app. It was very cool. But the first time he didn't know, so he took a gummy bear. Nothing happened. 8 minutes. Another gummy bear. Nothing happened. Another gummy bear. Nothing happened. Have you been hanging out with this guy? Anyways, that's why it takes a long time for the recession to come. I think we're now early third gummy bear phase of monetary policy. But, we'll see. We'll see. How long will the recession last? This is the Great Depression. Since the Great Depression, we haven't had long recessions. There shouldn't be a long recession. It should not be. Because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with our economy. Okay, house prices a little high, the stock market a little overvalued, but nothing really major here, right? This isn't a major problem. This isn't like '08, or it wasn't '74, we couldn't get oil, that's '74. This is when Volcker raised rates to 18%. We're not going to get that. We're nearing the end of the rate hiking cycle here. So these three recessions, the oil embargo by the Arabs, Volcker raising rates, and the housing bust of '08, '09, or '06, '07, whatever, those are aberrant. 12 months, 13 months, 1 percentage point decline in GDP, 1.5, 2-point hike in unemployment, that should do it. Now, let's talk about labor markets. They're tight, they're way tight. They're crazy tight, they're really strong, they're really good, they're really awful all at once. Here, employment pre-COVID. Today, employment now, today, 800,000 above where it was pre-COVID. That's unbelievably good. Unbelievably good. This is the dot-com boom bust. You lose 3 million jobs, peak to trough, right? Takes 4 years to get the jobs back. Housing bust, it takes 6 years to get 8 million jobs back. Here it takes 2 years and 5 months. 2 years and 5 months to get back 22 million jobs. 22 million jobs, 2 years and 5 months. Why did it take so long here and so long there? It took so long here and so long there because these were demand-side problem economies. Firms didn't believe the recession was over, and households didn't want to spend because they also weren't convinced the recession was over. If the firms don't invest and the households don't spend, you got a crappy economy. And unemployment improved very, very slowly because we weren't convinced the recession was done. Now, by contrast, it was a completely different story. First, we're locked in our homes, forced savings, Congress gives us money, the Fed lowers interest rates, unemployment starts to fall because we want to buy things. We don't want to work, but we want to consume. As a result of that, inflation starts to take off because we want to buy stuff more than we can make it. But the demand is insatiable. The firms will hire anybody who's alive and walks in with a heartbeat to hire them. So firms will hire anybody who shows up. If there were more people to hire, they'd have hired more people. It would have been better. Our supply chains would have been better. Inflation wouldn't have gotten so bad. And the Fed wouldn't have to raise rates. But because we all decided to not work, essentially, for a whole bunch of different reasons, we don't have enough workers. And then Congress gave us all those stimmy checks. This turned out to have largely been a mistake because we were eager to spend because we were locked in our homes with nothing to do. Unlike 12 and 20 years ago when the dot-com boom and the housing bust, it was very different. So here we fought the last war by stimulating the economy when it was utterly the wrong thing to do. Instead, there should have been a jobs bill saying if you worked before COVID and haven't worked since COVID came and now you get a full-time job, we as the federal government will give you $5,000 off your taxes or whatever, some number percentage, I don't know, whatever. So we fought the last war and we made mistakes and we generated a lot of inflation. We also generate a lot of employment, which is good, but a lot of inflation, which is not good. Now, oops, here, look what happened. Look at unemployment. It's back where it was pre-COVID level, 3.5. 2 months ago it was 3.5. Last month it bumped to 3.7. It's bouncing around between 3.5 and 3.7. This 3.5 was the lowest unemployment rate since the Vietnam War in the late 60s. So unemployment prior to COVID was already spectacularly low. And now it's back where it was. But it's tighter now than it was. This is a true number of 3.5%, but it's misleading. The government's not lying, the data's true, but it's not really telling us what's going on. The reason the unemployment rate is so low now is because the labor force participation rate's gone down. People have dropped out. What's your name? Scott dropped out of the labor force. He had a large collection of Ford Pintos. So the first car he owned as a young man at 16, and he has 10 of them. And his wife thinks he's a for loving on these cars every weekend. But now each of those cars is worth $1 million. He sold off a couple. He's retiring. His wife suddenly loves him a lot more. I'm joking. But things just happened. You got sick, you couldn't work. You have a heart transplant, you're afraid you'll get sick, you don't work. You have a kid, you can't put the kid in school because there's no teachers. You can't put the kid in daycare because there's no daycares. So you stay home or your wife stays home. Long COVID, you have long COVID, your wife has long COVID, they can't work. You go on and on. The list of reasons why people don't work or haven't been able to work or aren't willing to work is very long. You've lost a lot of people, some of them who dropped out of the labor force. This has pushed the unemployment rate artificially down. I mean, it's not artificial, it's true, but it's because of this weird artifact. But look, there's no prospect of this damn number improving. It's been flat now for a year. If you haven't come back already, you're probably not going to come back. You figured out how not to come back, how to steal, how to sofa surf your neighbors, friends, and cousins, right? I got a nephew like that, but I digress. This is a better measure of unemployment, a measure of tightness of unemployment. This is the number of Americans looking for a job divided by the number of open jobs. At the worst of the housing bust, there were 6.5 workers available per job. Literally, there were 13 million unemployed Americans in 08, or January of 09, and 2 million jobs. So 13 over 2, 6.5, right? And it falls to 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. At 1, there's a job per person. Okay, the job could be in San Francisco, and you could live in Miami, I get that. And they could want a computer programmer, and you're a fisherman. I understand that too. But you get the point. When the number's higher, you have a very tight labor market, a very loose labor market. And as it goes down, it gets tighter, and when it gets down here, it's remarkably tight. Prior to COVID, we had never seen a market that was this strong. We didn't have data in the Vietnam War on this. 1.2 jobs per person. I'm telling all my friends, quit their jobs, and before you quit your job, tell your boss they're a jerk, and demand a pay raise. In that order, and you'll get it. Because the labor market's so tight. Then COVID comes, 5 workers per job. There were literally 22 million unemployed Americans and 4 million jobs. 5 to 1. 4.1 million jobs, whatever the math works out to. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we go into la-la land. Here, at this point here, my finger is right there and there. We don't have 5 workers per job. No. At this point right there, not 5 workers per job, we have 1 worker for 2 jobs. There are 2 jobs per worker. The tightest market we'd ever seen. And suddenly you guys are paying a lot of money for labor. 5, 6, 7% increases because the workers just walk out, get another job, just go on LinkedIn, 30 seconds, they'll get 12 job offers, and they'll leave. This is causing inflation. It's a problem. And then we have, on top of all the reasons I said you weren't working, right? Daycare, childcare, schools, COVID, long COVID, fear of COVID, there's immigration. We're millions of people short from immigration policy because when Trump came in, he made immigration more difficult. That was really a stupid policy. But it turned out President Biden, when he came in, he reversed a lot of President Trump's policies he didn't like. But he kept that one, because he said to himself, that's friggin' stupid as hell. Let's keep it. That way we'll have a bipartisan, horrible immigration policy. And now we have 2 presidents in a row who've made it impossible to immigrate from a foreign country. And we have no population growth, because no one's having children, because sex is just too difficult, apparently. It's, oh, sex? No, let's not bother with that. Let's watch Netflix instead and watch The Handmaid's Tale or something. For those of you who've seen it, you'll understand. You know, I don't understand it. How, I mean, I don't know. Again, where's that guy with the marijuana there? Next time you smoke up, you know what to do. Yeah, right. Unprotected, preferably, right? This isn't practice. This is for serious. So we have bad policy. Now, these presidents do other bad things. I don't want you to think that that's the only bad policy. When Trump came in, he got us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was a big mistake. That was a free trade zone with a lot of countries. We now are suffering the consequences because we trade with other countries, and third countries have better trade deals with those countries than we do because we got out of the TPP. And then President Biden comes in and says, well, what can I do that's really, really stupid, above continuing Trump's stupid immigration policy? He goes, oh, let's kill the XL pipeline. So now we have no immigration and no energy. But I'm not bitter, no. So no immigration. So you have this graph. So I've showed you earlier already that this graph of unemployment is a bad measure of the economy's labor tightness. Don't look at it. It's not right. I mean, it's right, but it's meaningless. Look at the labor force participation number. That's meaningful. Look at the jobs per person number. That's meaningful. And now also look at this. Quits. People quit a job. They don't quit a job because it's cold and it's a Tuesday morning. They quit because they hate their friggin' boss, like the plague. Or they get a much better job offer. But most people quit jobs because of people. They don't quit the job because the job is bad. They quit because their boss sucks. But you don't quit a job just because your boss sucks, because you got to pay your bills. So look here. This is the dot-com boom. 2.4% of the population quit their job at the peak of the dot-com boom. Housing boom, 2.2% quit their jobs at the peak of the housing boom. Unemployment, 50-year low, 2.4% quit their job. 2.4, 2.2, whatever, call it 2.3, and say that's roughly the number that you get when people feel really empowered, and every morning on the drive to work, when all they want to do is get a sharp knife and stab it into the head of their boss. They're listening to Johnny Paycheck, who says, take this job and shove it. Right? 2.4, 2.2, look what it was. Last December, January, when there were 2 jobs per person, it was friggin' 3. If I didn't know what the unemployment rate was and all I saw was this graph, I'd say unemployment's below 3%. This is very tight labor market, and that's why wages are going up, and that's generating inflation. And you can see it right here. Among job quitters, they get almost an 8% pay raise. And if you're a lemming that stays in your crappy job, you barely get a 5% pay raise. It pays to quit. Now, there are 2 really insightful things about this graph. The first one is the gap between the green and the yellow is big. That tells us our labor markets are screwed up. There aren't enough workers in a big way. Quitters usually make more money because that's why they quit. But the gap shouldn't be so big. But the good news is they're both trending down a little bit. This may mean that the worst of wage hikes is behind us. It's a couple of months. I'm not prepared to put out the white flag and go yay, but I'm paying close attention. This could be really good news. So I'm nervous, but maybe the worst of inflation's sort of beginning to get behind us. Maybe. I'm not convinced, but possibly. Now, so let's change tack. And now that we've admitted that we have a problem with inflation because of the workers, we have an inflation problem. Now look carefully at this graph. You might see the evidence of the inflation. There's inflation, all right. Yeah, you got inflation. This is CPI in blue. Core is in red. The difference between the blue and the red is that the red doesn't include food and energy. Now, economists don't like to prefer to look at the red than the blue. Not because we don't like food and energy. Let me tell you, I love food and energy. On a cold day like today, energy is really, really good. I see a fireplace in the background. But the reason we look at the red and not the blue is because the blue bounces like crazy. And you want to understand the underlying trend in inflation. Inflation is historically one of the very noisiest series that are out there. So economists try and look at inflation like 6 or 7 or 10 different ways. They look at sticky inflation. They look at median inflation. They look at trimmed inflation, 16% trimmed inflation. There are millions of ways economists look at inflation, trying to understand the noise and to get rid of the signal. All right? The red is a better measure of the core, real American-induced inflation. I mean, think about it. Blue includes food and energy. What are the prime drivers of food and energy inflation? Weather and war. What else determines food and energy prices? Nothing. I mean, scientific improvements a little bit in the long run, but in the short run, year to year, month to month, it's just war and weather. Well, who really cares if there's a bad crop in Saskatchewan? Does that really matter in the long run? Yeah, a few months, bread's a little more. It'll be better weather next year. Yeah, whatever. Who cares? So the Fed says it doesn't matter. We're not going to rearrange monetary policy because of bad weather in New South Wales or a bumper crop in Iowa, right? Who cares? So you look at red. Blue's coming down. I think red's now done too. Red, you can see in the very far right's coming down. It's been sort of bouncing around going nowhere for the last 6 or 7 months. I think we're done. Energy prices are coming down. Transportation costs, as we've discussed. Interest rates are higher. Consumption's going to start to go down. CapEx. Now you add flat to declining inflation. I think we're good here. The big question is how fast does the inflation fall? That's the concern. It isn't that it's coming down. That's a foregone conclusion. It's the speed of the decline and the amount of the descent that matters. If it goes down quickly and stops at 4%, we're still screwed because the Fed wants 2 on red, not 4. So no one knows the answer. I can tell you 20 stories. I have no freaking clue. No one's gotten inflation right. Almost no one's gotten inflation right for a while. Now, the reason I'm nervous about inflation is I'm going to change the red from core, which is the same as blue but without food and energy. I'm now going to have it just services, half of GDP. Look at the service line. Whoa, hello. That is way up there. Half of GDP shows no signs of decline. Now, it really does show signs of decline. Let me explain. Wage prices may no longer be going up. That's good news. It doesn't solve the problem. Going up at 5% is still 5% inflation, right? But other stuff, food, energy, those are coming down. So that's good news. But then there's rents. Rents don't show up yet, but I think rents have peaked out. Rents. Then there's education inflation, healthcare inflation. Those are big sectors of the economy. If all that doesn't start to come down, inflation, services isn't going to come down. And absent service inflation falling, goods inflation is not enough to drive the problem away. It's not. So we have to watch services very closely. We'll see how that goes. I don't know. What's the Fed going to do? Look, the Fed knows nothing. I told you that. They just make it up. They're like trash talking on a basketball court. They know nothing. Fed funds right now is 3 7/8. They've raised rates very rapidly. Last 4 meetings in a row, they've raised rates by 3/4 of a point. 75 bips. 100 bips is 1%, basis points. So in Christmas, for a present to us, and December 4th when they meet, or the 5th, by the end of the year, the rate will only go up by 0.5 point, not 3/4 of a point. It's a gift. Do not take this as a sign of the Fed pivoting. The market is desperate to recover. The bulls are at every measure ready to go, yay, things are good. Powell's telling us things are going to be bad. In the end of August at Jackson Hole, he said, expect pain. I don't know about you, but when the central banker says expect pain, I expect pain. Because the central bank can inflict pain more quickly on more Americans than any other institution in the country. Very fast. Raise rates, you make misery. It's very simple. He's raising rates. So you're a banker. In late June, interest rates began to go down. last week of June, all of July, first week of August. We had 6 straight weeks of interest rate declines. The housing market improved a bit. I couldn't understand why. And then Powell went and said, not going to happen. You're premature. I'm taking dessert away. No fun dessert after dinner today. And then rates went up again. And then 2 or 3 weeks ago, they put out a press release after their last meeting, and it said literally something like, we're aware that as we raise rates, it causes problems. Maybe we'll raise rates more slowly. That's what they said. And suddenly the market goes up by 1,000 points because these stupid bulls go, whoa, the Fed's pivoting. No, the Fed's not pivoting. It's going to get a lot worse before the Fed pivots. Inflation's got to fall to roughly 3 or 4% and start to fall steadily before the Fed goes, maybe we're done. These are all false. We've had 5 or 6 or 7 of these bear market rallies. And I'm going to diverge for a second from my conversation here and talk about the stock market briefly. I'm not an expert in it, but if you see these very wild jumps up, that is not a good sign. That's a combination of mild euphoria because of stupidity, mixed with short sellers covering shorts. That's why you have a very strong rally, and then it goes nowhere. We've had 6 or 7 of these rallies so far. We'll have 3 or 4 more of them. You can trade and you can make a lot of money if you're smart and lucky. Lucky more than smart because you can't predict the market. But bull markets are long and slow and steady. They're not punctuated by these massive 1,000-point hikes. It doesn't happen in a bull market. So the Fed's going to raise rates 0.5 point before the end of the year, and then next year they'll raise rates 3, I think at most 3 more times, 1/4 point. Maybe another 50 bipper, and then a 25 bipper, and they stop, a February, and then a March. They meet every 6 weeks. So Fed funds ends up somewhere between 5 and 5.25, and that's it. Because 6 months from now or 7 months from now, inflation will have fallen. The key thing for the Fed is that the inflation rate had better be about the same as that number. Otherwise, the real rate remains negative. If inflation's here and the Fed funds rate's there, it's still a negative interest rate. That's still somewhat stimulative. By the end of the rate hiking cycle, you've got to get interest rates and inflation roughly the same, maybe even the Fed funds rate above the inflation rate. Now it was well below, keeps going up, and inflation's coming down, the Fed rate's going up, and somewhere they're going to meet or get above, and then they'll probably stop. That's when it generally stops. There are rare exceptions like 82 when things are terrible, but this is not that. And then we're done, right? And then by the end of the year, we're in the recession, and they start to lower rates again. And the 10-year Treasury goes nowhere. Now, this is another manifestation of service inflation. You can see how bad it is. 7.5%. This is rents. It's like 30% of CPI is rent. Unless this starts to come down meaningfully, we got a problem on our hands. Now, we'll talk about housing and we'll wrap it up. So this is don't build homes. They got decimated and crushed in the recession here, and they quit their careers. And all their illegal workers went back to Mexico or Guatemala or Honduras or Nicaragua or wherever it was, or legal ones for that matter. And they can't make a living. And now we need them desperately, and the builders aren't there, and their suppliers aren't there. And then our supply chain snapped, and labor died, and whatever. Oh yeah, that's another reason we have a labor shortage. 400,000 or 500,000 workers died because of COVID or related to COVID. Maybe a heart attack or a stroke or whatever, right? So look at housing. Housing peaks at 4 million units of inventory. That one line is kind of like a middle finger. And then it goes here to 800,000. That was the peak of the housing market right there. 80% decline over 13 years. And what happens to prices? Salaries in red, home prices in blue. Whoa, shortage, higher price. No surprise. In Japan, prices aren't very high for houses because every year they build as many houses or more than they have people. Their population's shrinking. But house prices aren't high there. This is not a necessary outcome. This is a policy outcome decided by cities and counties and states that is wrecking our economy, quite frankly. If you can do one thing to fix your community, it's build more homes. Everything else will follow with it. But if you can't afford a house, you move away, right? This is the most fascinating thing about the housing market right now. This is inventory in months, 2, 4, 6, 8 months. This is home price appreciation by month, 1%, 12% a year, 2%, 24% a year. For the last year or so, 2 years, we've been living up here. Very little inventory, 2 months, very rapid price appreciation. This is 18% a year right there. right? That's 24, that's 18. And then what happened? The last couple of months, the dots have moved here. There's been almost no increase in inventory from there to there. It's a small increase. But look at the price appreciation. It's gone from rapid to slow to mildly negative to wildly negative in 4 or 5 months. We've never seen this before. Just as the labor market is no longer the same labor market, and looking at unemployment is no longer valuable, looking at inventory is no longer valuable. Look, this is the Case-Shiller data. It's the best housing data out there. It comes out late. It's months old, but it's the best. In February, home prices appreciated 2% in 1 month, from Jan to Feb. And in March, they increased 2.1% from Feb to March. The strongest 2 months of the housing market in the history of the housing market. By April, we're here at 1.75. By May, we're 1.3. By June, we're 0.2. By July, we're minus 0.4. And by September or August, I forgot which month by now, we're almost at -1. That's 10% decline a year. In 5 months, we've gone from the hottest housing market in the history of housing markets to stone cold, with no change in inventory. Wow, it's unbelievable. Why? Because owning a house is too damn expensive. Home prices are crazy high, and now rates are crazy high. And that's what the Fed wants. The Fed wants to drive the housing market into recession because it's very interest sensitive. Under normal conditions, they drive the auto market into recession. They want to drive commercial construction into recession. They want to drive manufacturing into recession. And the longer they keep rates up, the more sectors of the economy will fall into recession. Depends how fast inflation responds. The quicker it responds, the less things go into recession, the less bad it is. It just takes time. This is housing. This is housing sales. They friggin' plummeted. Oh, this is an old slide. I apologize. The number now is at 4.4 million over here, not there. I didn't update this one. I apologize. We're down there. This is a huge decline. We're almost done. Maybe a little more to go, another 10%, but I think we're probably close. 4 million is probably as low as we get, probably. Why is the housing market responding like this? It's responding like this because we're all locked into our damn house. Because what's your name, miss? Kim. You bought a house a year ago. You were really smart. And you got a 2.875 mortgage, the lowest rate. That's the trough in rates. You're never going to leave your house. You want to buy a bigger house. You just had twins, triplets. You look great, but you had triplets recently. And now you need a bigger house. The problem is she wants a bigger house. The house is going to cost twice as much money. So the mortgage, your $300,000 mortgage, becomes a $600,000 mortgage. And the rate goes from 3 to 7. And you go, not happening. You'll stay in the house for a couple of years and have the mayhem. Rates will fall. You'll move later. But we're all in the same boat. Inventory's low because no one's putting their house on the market. That should protect the market from declines. But the problem is the same people who aren't putting their house on the market also aren't buying a house. So you have the whole housing market's going into a deep cryogenic freeze. That's repetitive, but you get the point. Some cryogenic state. Nothing's happening. No one's selling, no one's buying, no one's interested. Because rates are too high and we've all locked in. If you bought a house in the last 2 years, you got a low mortgage. And if you refied like everybody did, when the rates went down originally, there were 13 or 14 million Americans who could refi and get a better rate, as recently as a year ago. Now it's like 200,000 in the whole country. No one refis anymore. There's no savings to get. And this is, you can see the deterioration. Look at blue. Blue early in the year was the best market ever. Even in early March, it was the best market ever. And now by the end of the year, it's the worst in 10 years. First-time mortgage apps every week. This is a week-old data, 2 weeks old, because it came out last week and it was for the prior week. So it's 10, 12 days old now or something. Yeah, we get new data tomorrow. So it's 13-day-old data. That's unbelievable to see this rate of deterioration. That's profound, from best to worst in 7 months. And then this is housing optimism by home builders. Look at this. Sentiment declines, you have a recession. That's 94, when the housing market got hit, but there was no national recession. Sentiment goes down, recession. Sentiment goes down, recession. Sentiment goes down, recession. Look at sentiment now. The decline in sentiment now is bigger than COVID. When the housing market's strong, here, 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 and the labor market's strong, when quits were high at 2.2 and 2.4%, What happens? Let me go back. I'm getting carried away here. I know you're less interested in this than I am, probably. Here it goes down. What happens? Here it goes down. What do you get? Here it goes down, and here it's coming down. When this number gets too high, the Fed says, whoa, workers are feeling too giddy, we better kick them a little bit. Too much inflation. Here, the market gets too strong. And the Fed says, oh, builders are feeling too giddy, we better kick them. Because the economy is too good. Inflation is being generated, let's raise rates and kill it. So these are signs that the Fed's going to do something, and the Fed's going to do something. So look at single fam starts. They're friggin' falling like an anvil off a friggin' Bugs Bunny cartoon cliff. Collapsing. So we walk into this with a housing shortage, and now we stop building houses. How convenient is that? So in 2 years, the recession's all gone, a year and a half, whatever it is, 2 years. And then household formation improves, and no one can buy a house. Fantastic. And then builders have too much inventory, so they're trying to get rid of their inventory cheaply, fast, because every month their house is worth less than it was a month before. That's not a very appealing thought. You have investors, the mega investors, buying lots of houses to rent them out. They're not buying right now. They've pulled out. So supply goes up because the builders don't want houses. The investors aren't buying houses, so demand has gone down, pushing prices down more quickly. And then but this is not '08, not '08. Look at the demographics 13 years ago. Demographics 13 years ago, about here, bad demographics. Now you have spectacular demographics. In 2 or 3 years, these guys, the biggest cohort of US history, they're now in their late 20s, early 30s, they're going to buy a house, no houses to buy. It's a short-term problem in the housing market, but it's a solve that goes away for the next 10, 12 years, and then we go into real trouble, but that's a whole separate conversation. Building a house is much more expensive, so builders aren't going to build that many houses. And look at the houses that they build. 40% of the friggin' houses are over $500,000. Entry level? I don't think so. Maybe in San Francisco, that's entry level, but not here. There it's $2 million is the entry level. Okay, I'm kidding, but you get my point. Under 300,000, it was 80%. Now it's friggin' like 5. And there's no unemployment super low in construction, so you're not going to get workers to build houses. And then the IIJA is coming out, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So we're going to start building roads and sewer systems and police stations and broadband networks and so on. So you're not going to get workers to build houses either. And then there's no credit. Unlike 15 years ago, when your dog or cat could apply for a loan at a bank, not without assistance, just they could walk in and do it themselves, you know. Now this is not credit. There's no credit available. Now Dodd-Frank stopped that. So there's no credit, no homes, population's growing, shortage of housing. We had a surplus of housing. Apartment rents, vacancies were super high 13 years ago. Now they're friggin' non-existent. So what do? You buy a single wide house. And it costs $80,000, $90,000 for a friggin' single wide. And you still have no water and sewer or septic and well, and you have no land. Imagine you want land, it's going to cost you, what, $10,000 or $15,000 more? And you want a well and a septic system, it's going to cost you, what, $30,000 more? You're at $130,000 for a damn crappy house. This is the lowest quality house you can buy. There's nothing cheaper than this, right? It's to a lower quality. It's not to a sticks and bricks quality or a modular home. This is a HUD code home. This is double wide, so you're a fancy person. $160,000 for a friggin' double wide, without land, without water. Vacancies. Now, the catch is multifam construction is going up. There's a lot of multifam in the pipeline. It's the most there's been since the early 70s, with the post-Great Society, LBJ and Nixon and all that sort of stuff. Multifam sentiment's declining because rents are going, people are going to not pay their rent, and the cost of capital is going up. Builders don't want to build where there's rent control or inclusionary zoning. You want to kill your housing market? These are great ways to do it. I mean, kill the construction of the market and make homeowners. If I were a homeowner, I own lots of multifam units here in Cincinnati, I would be in favor of rent control and inclusionary zoning. Because we would never build any more units, and my rents would go up. This is a gift to landlords. It's killing the builders, and it's a gift to landlords, as long as they're not in rent control. And the cost of rent control has now raised the price of a house. This was an apartment, 30% of the cost is regulatory, and now it's 40.6%. Change the regulations. Make it easy for builders to build something. We can argue what and how, but it's too hard. And apartments are the most valuable asset. The cap rates on apartments are the lowest of anything. And the worst, of course, are hotels because, well, hotels aren't so popular. Now, 4 more slides and we're done. If you don't know where you live, I have an arrow conveniently over Ohio. Now, you're at the low end of Ohio, the bottom end, that's more like Cleveland, the mistake on the lake. And this is like Columbus in the middle, and that's Cincinnati over there. But Dayton's over here somewhere, I guess. I don't know, whatever. I'm not from Ohio. I don't need to know geography. But you're an okay state. I mean, your population growth was small. Keep this in mind. Now, the further south you get in the state, the better off you are economically, right? Northern Ohio, Cleveland's bad. Up there, Lorraine and all those places, in Canton. I mean, unless you're a football player, you don't want to end up in Canton. But this is population growth over the last 10 years. This is population growth over the last year or two. This whole upper Midwest here, Northeast, whatever you want to call it, not doing so great. Keep this in mind. Last year, population movement. No one's moving to Ohio. You're number 37. Keep this in mind. Fix your weather. That's number 1. Number 2, fix your taxes. Indiana has done a much better job than you. Of all the states up here, Indiana is the winner. They've done the best, and their weather's the same as yours, their geographic location. The only benefit they have is they're closer to the brain-dead people in Illinois. And the Illinoisans are moving north to Wisconsin, Madison, and Milwaukee, and east to Indianapolis. You're a little far away in Columbus and Cleveland and Cincinnati, but nonetheless, that's the only real edge they have. But do what they do. They've done the best they have. Of all the states here, I think they've done the best. Now, where's population moving? If you're thinking of moving, move to the south, Texas, and the Intermountain West. South, Texas, and the Intermountain West. South, Texas, and the Intermountain West. Now, wrap it up. How's the economy right now? This is March. Pretty good, 4 bad states. Ignore which states they are. It doesn't matter. It's the population in the states that matters. 4. June, you got like 12 or 13 now that are weaker, and a few of them are actually weak. But this is Montana. Who cares? Like what, 10 people live there? Doesn't matter. And then last but not least, September, okay, Montana's in the crap can, but who cares? Again, no one lives there. Maine also, like 12 people too. They move back and forth, the same person, They have a 1 flight a month, and the population changes whenever the flight happens. But yeah, West Virginia is now stinky, and the upper Midwest, and the whole, you see here, weakness. This is the manufacturing area of the country, right? It's weakening because manufacturing's slowing down. Wow, we're done. I've spoken way too long. Let's wrap it up. 22 is going to be a good year. We're still okay. We're not in recession. Maybe even the first quarter of 23 is not in recession. Maybe even the second quarter, but I doubt it lasts that long. But we'll see. The Fed's going to raise rates. That's the problem. They're going to raise rates until they see evidence of inflation coming down. They want to see month after month after month after month of serious reduction in inflation before they stop raising rates. And then they'll flatten them for a while, and they'll keep them flat for a bunch, and then they'll start to lower. This is a slow process. But as soon as they tell us they're going to start to lower rates, next fall, about a year from now, the stock market goes up. It's morning in America, again, as Ronald Reagan might say. We're going to create 200,000 jobs in November data and December data. And then next year it weakens because CapEx and consumer spending and all this stuff begins to catch up with us. Inflation's clearly peaked. The question is, how fast does it fall and how low does it get? If you know the answers to those questions, you can be a very rich woman or man in the very short future. Spending on services will rise. We're pivoting from buying goods to services. It's slower than I thought because we're still stuck buying stupid goods for some I think we're just used to doing it now. We've learned to just push things on Amazon, and now we don't stop. Oh, I was deprived. Oh, I feel bad. I want to buy something. I don't know. Anyways, lastly, follow 3 things. Look at the inventory of whatever industry you're in. As it goes up, price appreciation will go down. If it gets high enough, it stops going up altogether. Unemployment will rise from 3.5, its trough, to 5 or 5.5 maybe. Hopefully not, but it might well. And inflation is public enemy number 1. Watch it closely. It will give you the best indication of what the Fed will do. Now that said, the unemployment and inflation rates are lagging economic indicators. I don't want to get into that too much. Now, before I close, this is my name, my cell number, my phone number, my Twitter handle, and my email address. I put out 70 words every day on the economy. No graphs, no ads, no charts, no links, and no photos. If you want to get it, the easiest way is to take your phone, text the word bow tie, imagine that, one word, to the 5-digit number 22828, Not only will you live long and prosper, but you'll know a lot about economics. I'm a raging, crazy economist. You've been a wonderful audience. I have spoken here probably way too long. But you stayed and hadn't left, so I'm the victim. You're the cause. I'm collateral damage if you're just sitting in your seat in your inertia. But don't blame me, right? I'll be hanging out afterwards, taking questions as long as people have questions to ask. It's been a pleasure being here. I look forward to chatting with you and hope to see you sometime in the future. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hard to get.
Oh.
I know. Hopefully we don't have a ton of feedback. There we go. All right, we gave Dr. Eisenberg a little parting gift. You will be able to get through CVG. We had a box knife go through last week. And Mr. Marijuana did put some gummies in there, so I'm just saying. Real quickly, we wanted to recognize our soon-to-be graduates of our Leadership Warren County class of 2022. If you guys want to stand up. Congratulations on your graduation.
There we go.
And just a real quick show of hands, who else has attended or been a part of Leadership Warren County?
Come on, let's
It's
see
a
those
great
hands.
program. I'm really excited to see all of us that have gone through, and I encourage you to send more people through. It's a great opportunity to learn about the county. All right, with that, I would like to say a thank you to the Manor House. I appreciate all that you've done for us today. The food was excellent. We appreciate you taking care of us this morning. If you do have questions, please come up and see Dr. Eisenberg. And with that, I hope you have a great day and a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, everyone.